on. There we go. Fabulous. So for those of you who would like to catch up and be part of the Starseed community, I am going to do Starseed 1 again and review it and go over everything, which is going to include regression work, going into the Akashic records, working with Thoth and the ancient Egyptian energy, releasing shame and guilt, working with letting go of the ego, moving into surrender, so many things. It's a very, very powerful class, the most powerful class I've ever taught. And it is forced and connected with energies, not only from Telos and the Lemurian, but Malta and journeys there. And, you know, I've just gotten a lot of really incredible feedback that it's been extremely helpful in raising the consciousness. So that is my laser focus and mission, and just inviting anyone who wants to be a part of that, because the idea is to have 144,000 people join the Starseed grid around the planet to create peace and change and move into 5D. So with that, I think we'll just get started, and I'll bring in Raphael. When I channel Raphael, if you're new to this process, I close my eyes, my hands kind of move around a bit, I make a toning sound, and then Raphael will come in and say hello, and we'll go from there. All right. Be right with you guys. If everybody wants to get centered and settled in, I know we have questions that came in to the Google form that Casey's going to be asking. All right.
Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Hello.
It is our pleasure, as always, to be here with all of you in our work of remembering you, reminding you that you are divine and perfect. And it is that if we could talk to you for hours and hours and hours and hours about all of your questions, and whatever it is that you're wanting to ask us, we would continuously tell you that at the end of anything in which you're really wanting to know, it is about love. And yet sometimes it is difficult to sum things into that word or to fully grasp that. But when you choose love for self and for others, and in decision and in speaking and in acting and in being, all that you're so worried about and trying to figure out and wondering about and feeling anxious about begins to fall away as you begin to continue to align with that vibration. And so we know that you have your own questions, and we will tune in tonight to whatever it is you're wanting to talk about. And so, what is it?
Hi, Raphael. Well, we'll start all about the love, right? Can you explain to us more about what the fifth dimension is? Is it heaven on earth?
It is that sometimes there is this confusion that many have about the fifth dimension, as if it is a place. And the fifth dimension is not a place that is different from where it is that you are. The fifth dimension is a consciousness. And when you are vibrating at the fifth dimensional consciousness, which is expressing a higher light quotation of love, then your experience accordingly reflects that, and you begin to witness your life and all aspects of it from a fifth dimensional quality. And that quality allows you to see the perception of how all things are connected, how all things are working toward your highest good, how it is that you can trust what is unfolding, and that there is a divine plan that is in order, and that you can bring and understand and see the light that resides in all things. And when that is occurring, you are operating obviously at a much higher frequency, and the perception of what you call heaven on earth becomes more and more of your experience. And it sometimes is confusing, because often even myself, when I am talking to you about the fifth dimension, we talk about the flowers blooming and the butterflies flittering about, and the sense of the crystalline cities and the beauty and the majesty of the dimension. But you must understand that even in that dimension of the fifth dimension, duality exists. And it is that all aspects of even what you might label in the understanding of where you are to be now, the shadow, is still present, in that there is always an opportunity to excel, to move through, to grow, to accelerate one's vibration, even in what you would label or understand as the fifth dimension. The difference is that there is conscious awareness that it is growth, that it is divine, that there is a reason, that you are moving through it. And the lower vibrations of fear and ego, of a sense of victimhood, shame, and guilt, and all of those lower vibrations aren't operating. So it doesn't mean that there are not obstacles or challenges or opportunities, perhaps would be a better word, to excel and to grow and to evolve, because you are always moving through the space of light and dark, but you're not judging it in the way as good and bad, but you're more in a state of neutrality, in the understanding of the perfection of all things, and the embracing of the things that in the past perhaps were labeled as bad, and bringing them into a more unified consciousness. So the fifth dimension is a consciousness. It is not a place, but when you're in fifth dimensional consciousness, the place that you reside and the mirrored reflection of it appears more like what you would describe as heaven on earth, because that feeling of anxiety, of fear, of worry, of all of those types of vibrational energies that are still more present in the third dimension are more eliminated. They're not really aligning, because you're already vibrating in a higher place. So it's not a place that you're going to ascend to up into the heavens, in which there's often this talk about a separation from those perhaps who are in the third dimension and the fifth dimension, or those who perhaps will move into a higher consciousness and will be in the fifth dimension. Will they leave another behind? We often hear a worry. Well, I'm evolving on a spiritual level and I'm ascending and I'm doing this work, and will I leave behind those that I love? It is that your consciousness may not be vibrating at the same frequency of another, but it doesn't mean that you are actually in a physically in a different place. You can both be simultaneously in the same home, in the same geographical location, even having 90% of the same experiences. And depending on the level of consciousness, one would interpret those experiences with divinity, with love, with pleasure, with joy, with excitement, with anticipation, with recognition and understanding of how it's all working and moving toward their highest good. And another may experience the same set of circumstances is in the same location as they are the victim. And how could this happen to me? And this is horrible. And what am I going to do? And this is difficult. And I can never get ahead. And I never have enough money. And I'm never going to meet anyone. And whatever it may be, because they have a different consciousness. And so it's not that the place is so not much different, but the perception of the place itself is reflective of the consciousness you are holding. And so for one, depending on if they are operating in higher states of consciousness, they are experiencing heaven on earth. So heaven on earth for them, it becomes their reality.
Thank you so much, Raphael. That's very clear. And so in terms of us reaching that stage of consciousness of 5D and accelerating our vibration, the next question comes in saying, are there hidden agendas keeping us from reaching our divine potential?
There's a lot of discussion about this. And this is a very, very fine line. Because it is that when you place your energy and your attention on what you label as dark or hidden agendas that are controlling you, you are giving that agenda more energy and more power to expand. However, at the same time, there is a need to flash a light upon powers that may be outside of self that have an agenda to collectively manipulate or control large masses of beings. And so awareness that such a thing may be existing is an opportunity to shed light upon it and to cut the cords from that matrix, which we call the fear matrix, so that one can reclaim their own power, stand in their own authenticity and truth as what would be perceived as sovereign being, moving forward in raising their consciousness to create a new reality, which we often call the fifth dimension. And so it's important, though, because sometimes what happens in having an awareness of something, that beings can get caught in the need to bring so much awareness to it that they harp on it to a point in which they are putting so much attention to it that they are actually feeding the very thing that they are looking so down upon. They are giving it food or energy to grow. And so it's important to have awareness and to be notice where perhaps fear is penetrating your electromagnetic field, your auric field, from outside collective thought patterns that may be infiltrating you through social media, through television, through the collective thinking process, through ideology, through belief systems and pre-programming during childhood and so on, and to recognize where those programs have been installed and if they've been installed and are continuing to remain present due to the fact that they are aligning with the vibration of fear. And in doing so, in elevating the vibration out of fear, you can begin to dissemble, break down those patterns and those matrices. But if you start putting all of your attention on that there are these beings out to get you and that they are collectively working to hold you in their grips of power and that you are losing your ability to be free, then you are looking at that not from a place of expanding into your own power, but from your own fear. And then that fear is like food to allow and to perpetuate that energy to expand. So ultimately what is needed is, rather than looking outside of self as to these things that might be labeled as hidden agendas around the collective, to go within and recognize if there's any vibrational patterns residing within self that are based in fear, that are coming to the surface and are matching that agenda, and that are expanding upon it, so that you then are able to deprogram or collapse any fear programming within your own being. You see, when we look down upon the planet from our perspective, and we will reiterate it in this fashion, even though perhaps it is not accurate from our perspective, because we are not outside of yourself floating out from a higher place looking at you, but often from your understanding you perceive us that way. What we see is the layers and layers of what we call grid systems. And that's why we're working with all of you to create the Starseed Grid, because that Starseed Grid is operating at a very, very, very high, ancient, original, beautiful, unified, crystalline frequency. And it is a pattern all around the planet that as more beings elevate and release these lower vibrations and begin to excel in their own field and tap into, begin to create a pulsation, like a breath of light pulsating around the planet, where the lower frequencies begin to be diminished, or what would be the word, they dissipate. But below that starseed grid, there are other grid intact. And many of them are beautiful and are utilized to support the higher realms and beings such as myself, and travel systems, and they have different words to them, such as the solar grid or the crystalline grid and so on. But when you start to drop beyond that into what we call the toric field around the earth, and you even go beyond that, even lower into the human collective consciousness, there are also grids around pockets of the collective consciousness that are operating in those lower consciousness frequencies, one of them being a matrix of what we call fear. And it is mucky, and instead of the crystalline grid or the starseed grid that is glistening and glimmering in a luministic, beautiful light, it is goopy and sticky, and it is very entangled. And you can get caught or entangled in that, and if you were to align it with an energy or an emotion, it would be fear. And fear is alluring and easy to attach to self and to it, because it finds any trauma in the body, any wound, any past concern. And if it can attune to it, and you attune to it, you can get caught in its grip. Now, it's not something to be afraid of. You're not to be fearful of it, but it is that the way to break free of it is to expand your consciousness into higher octaves by vibrating at a higher frequency, by bringing awareness and facing the fear head on, not running from it, not hiding from it, not putting it under the rug, not turning away from it, but facing it. And in facing it, then you can bring love to it. You can bring awareness to it. You can bring curiosity to it. You can have a standoff with it. And when you stand up to it in the courage and the willingness to feel the fear, to allow it to be with you, to step right into the muckiness of it, to say, all right, come at me, I'm ready, and you go toward it, and you allow it to have its expression, you allow it to have its life, you allow it to speak its truth, then you begin to laugh. Because it's like when you're having an argument with someone, and you're really arguing back and forth, and the energy is heightening and heightening and heightening, and you're like this at one another. And then all of a sudden, one of you, for some reason, starts to just gain a little glimpse of perspective. And you start to just laugh. And then all of a sudden, you're really, really laughing at the ridiculousness of this argument because you can see the ridiculousness of it. You start to vibrate just for a split second out of that quadrant frequency, right? And when that laughter happens, it's like an explosion and a diffusion of the argument, and it just, the energy dissipates. And so when it's the same, when you can face the fear and go right into it and really allow yourself a willingness to be in the soup of it without putting it aside, rationalizing it, or trying to figure or find your way out of it, and be with it, then you recognize it's just energy. And when you recognize it's just energy and you are with it, all of a sudden it begins to lose its allure and its power or its grip over you. And you realize that it's just a form of energy. It may be manipulative, it may have an agenda, but when you perceive it from a higher perspective, it loses all of its power. And then you move into a new frequency and it begins to disperse itself. So it can only have a grip on you if you're trying to run from it, trying to get away from it, trying to put it somewhere other than where it is, trying to fight it, trying to rationalize through it, trying to think your way out of it. But if you're willing to accept and to surrender and to be with it, it literally only takes a minute second to pass through it. And so that's why we were talking about when you begin to notice something that's fear-based or that is a hidden agenda that wants a person personally or collective group of people to adhere to an idea or a program or an understanding or a particular way of being, and you push that much against it in the fighting of it, then in itself, you're expanding it. But if you can be with it, it has literally nothing over you. And sometimes we know that might be a little bit confusing, but ultimately what we are saying is to be present in it, and in the presence of love with it. It no longer is mirrored in your experience to be something in which to be afraid of.
Very wise. Thank you, Raphael. What I'm kind of wondering, which is related to the next question, is how do we surrender to that fear without getting caught and stuck in it at the same time?
Well, because you have to see it as energy. It's not about the mind. No, we don't want you to get caught in the minutia of the story of the fear. That's different. We're talking about the energy of it, because you perceive it through the mind as a threat. Something you're afraid of is a threat. But when you face it and you are sitting with it and you allow it to have the fear that it wants, you allow it to expand, you allow it to have its life, then you can see that it's just energy, and then you can begin to open up the space where you had contained it. You see, fear can only have a grip on you if it is contained within your auric field because you're fearful of it. But when you face it and you allow the field to open, then it begins to expand and it dissipates and it floats away. And then you can look at it and recognize that it actually was never a threat before. It is just that you chose to see it as a threat because you had contained it in your field. But if you allow the field to be with it, and then you open it up and you witness it, it just passes through. Because you see, it can only have a grip on you if you allow it to be gripping your field, if you're contracting and holding it within. So that's why you always hear let it go, or surrender to what is. And what that really is saying is take your auric field and expand, open it up, and allow the energy that you're contracting, that you're afraid of, to have its life and to be free. And as you allow it to be free, it begins to expand beyond the perimeters of the containment where you are holding it, and then it is no longer a threat. And so it is a willingness to surrender and to let go, and at the same time to engage and to be with it. And that's why it's confusing. It's the same as manifesting can be confusing as well. It's the very same concept, because it's both. Many will say, well, I'm told with the law of attraction that I must be thinking about or creating all the time and working on whatever I want and forcing or making it happen. And yet other beings may tell me, well, you need to just surrender and allow the universe to play out and into all of that. And then people will wonder, well, what is it? Well, it's both. You're to have an intent, right, of what it is you're wanting to create. You're supposed to have a vision of what the experience, but then you have to expand beyond that into the trusting of the higher aspect of your higher self and beyond, that is orchestrating for your highest good all things to align in a universal plan to unfold in their perfection. And in the willingness to surrender to that, it continues to line up in that way for you. So it's the same thing here with the fear. It is that you would have to awareness that it is there first, to step in and to not be afraid of the fear, to feel it and allow yourself to feel the fear, which may in a moment bring up sadness. It might bring you to a state of deep anger or resentment. You may begin to really examine circumstances. You may begin to cry. But when you are willing to feel the fear and to be with it, to acknowledge it, to be present with it, then quickly it begins to show its life, and then you open up your field and it begins to expand and expand and expand until it dissipates. And then you realize that thing you were so afraid of in itself really isn't a threat. The only threat is the containment of the restriction created in the mind that has told you that it is a threat. But it is very unusual that it is an actual threat, unless, of course, a tiger is running toward you and is going to attack you with its claws, or something of this sort, a physical thing that may be happening that is an actual threat. But most fear that we are discussing in this conversation is a fear that is created by the mind of the perception of what will happen in the future, or a story of what has happened, or a fear of what is collectively happening that you are being held in. And when you are just in it, and then you realize that it isn't anything really except an idea in the mind that is contracted into an energy, and you allow the energy to have its freedom to express itself, it is no longer a threat, and the vibration of the fear begins to dissipate.
Thank you, Raphael. So you got into our next question about manifestation and when do we take action and when do we surrender? And so is there any way that you could be more specific of when we should know to take our power back and when we should surrender?
It is to have a clear vision of your life, a clear vision of your desire. But you see, sometimes you can, that's the other question. A lot of people will say, well, some tell me to be very, very specific in my manifesting, and others say to be broader. Our perspective is always to go broad, because if you go broad in that your ultimate goal is to experience pure joy, and that joy and beauty and bliss and harmony perhaps is the outcome, the universe will keep aligning circumstances to lead you toward that joy. Now, of course, now that there is such a great elevation in the vibration of consciousness, the ability to manifest tangible material objects and things is quickening at such a rapid pace that any of you on this call can do that at any time through the intent that you want a red Ferrari, whatever it might be, right? You can conjure that up. You can manifest that. And if you think you can't, think again, because you can, because it's just bringing molecular structure and energy together to be a mirrored reflection of the intent of your thought and the projection of your visualization of the belief of what you know to be is true, and it becomes your experience. You can all do that. But does the Ferrari and the red car bring you joy? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's fun and it's fast, but how much joy really is in alignment with that? And if joy is really the ultimate thing you are looking at, maybe it brings you joy for a period of time, but then you're just seeking another thing for joy, and you can never find joy from the material anyway. So if you want to bypass that whole process, and be elevating at even a higher frequency, you're going toward the emotion that you are seeking ultimately, which is happiness, which is bliss, which is understanding, which is unification, which is union, which is love, which is acceptance, all of those things. And then life will keep bringing things into alignment and into circumstances, and they'll keep unfolding. And sometimes when they come in, you say, well, how could this possibly be coming into my reality? This isn't what I had planned for. This isn't what I created. This wasn't the thing that I had put in my visualization and my affirmation box. Why is it showing up? It is in the trusting that it is showing up that the universe is truly conspiring for your highest good, and that it is that the intent of the manifestation is that the universe is always conspiring for my highest good. And sometimes I cannot see that in the moment, but when I look back in perspective, I see the beauty and the perfection in the divinity of all that is. So yes, you can manifest, and you all need to do that. That's important. You need to create so that you can reclaim your power as the creator of your experience, and the knowing that you have that capacity. That's important. So if you are wanting to create $1 million, then go ahead and do it. And it's not so much in having the $1 million, but in the knowing of reclaiming your power, that you are the manifester and the creator and the driver of your experience, and that you are not a victim in it, and that all things are moving toward your highest good, and that you have the capacity to do that 100%. But what we're saying is that you can have way more than that, because that in itself does not bring you the ultimate joy you're seeking. Because as you very well know, someone who is living in a dirt floor in a hut in the middle of nowhere with little food to eat, but a loving family, may be really experiencing more joy than the one in the $10 million mansion with the 5-car garage. They don't necessarily equate to joyfulness, to happiness. So you can manifest, but what we're talking about is manifesting what it is from an essence point that you're really desiring, not from a material point. Not that having material things is bad. There's no judgment, and you can have them. It's part of your birthright to create anything at any time, at wherever you're wanting. It's an absolute given. You've forgotten that, and you have a story about why you can't do it, or a victim mentality, or a lack mentality, or an idea that it has to be a struggle. All right, that's all part of the story you have. But in reality, it's just moving energy together to mirror the belief in which you are true to know is, and it begins to reflect and become so. That's all it is. And so it's all about recognizing what is your belief, where you're putting your attention, what is your thought process, what words are you speaking, what are you thinking about, what are you creating, what level are you vibrating at. And for sure you can't create through the vibration of fear. You all know that. Well, you can create, all right. You're not going to create anything you're going to like. So fear has been put in place to be a warning sign that you're about to drive off a cliff, or that a bear is about to attack you, or that your adrenaline should go up and you should run in the other direction, or that lightning might strike. But the fear that we're talking about is not in alignment with the survival aspect of an animal instinct, that fear was given to you for a purpose, for survival of the fittest. We're talking about fear that is conjectured in the mind, that has been created by a story that you've told yourself and conjured up to be true, that isn't actually part of reality at all. And it's not even true. So first you have to find out if it's true or not, that idea that you've told yourself to be so afraid of.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people are afraid of manifesting because they're worried that they can't control their thoughts enough, and will manifest from a place of fear. And so the next question that was written here is, if I've done bad things, will karma get me, and will I be punished?
No, there is no punishment. That's a very outdated perception, that there's a God in the sky that's judging and punishing you from your behavior. Now, if you choose consciously to do something in which you know is not in alignment with integrity, you may awaken to that idea that that is true, and believe that because you have done so that you should be punished, in which case you will create a scenario in which something may show up in your experience that feels like a punishment. But it is not external, it is all internal. Heaven on earth is not a place outside of self, but a place that resides within. And the same is true for hell. It is not a burning place beneath the earth with fire and a devil. It resides within your own being, that is created from your own torment. Perhaps sometimes that you are blaming or feeling guilty and creating self-sabotaging or punishment energies to come into your experience, in order for you to recognize that you're worthy of love and forgiveness, to move through them, to expand into something new. And it is all part of the process. But it is that the shadow and the light are all necessary. It is not that the shadow is bad. And it is not that you're being punished when you have an experience that you label as good or bad, or that is the shadow side, because the shadow side has to be there. It is duality. It is both. It is those great, inspiring, creative beings, such as your Einsteins or whatever it may be. Many of them go through the dark night of the soul, or they have great highs and lows, their creativity, their expression, their beauty that they bring to the planet. And yet some of your greatest artists have the deepest lows and the greatest depression, and at the same time leave behind the greatest mark on the planet, because they have to, in order for that light to express itself to such a degree, it has to balance itself in the light and the shadow. It comes up. But the idea is that you don't have to sit in the shadow, but you can utilize the fear or the shadow or the punishment, is whatever you might want to call it, or the bad, to be an opportunity for transmutation, for alchemy, for shifting, for growing, for moving through, and to expanding and opening into something new. And as you continue to elevate your vibration, the need for drama and big expansive meltdowns become less and less and less, because you are able to step back from a perspective and perceive even that which in the past you would label as bad as an opportunity or part of the human collective process that is needed to evolve personal self or collective.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess the question is, how can we gain more trust and faith within ourselves in our ability to control what we are putting our consciousness on?
Oh, it is to trust in you and to expand on and pat yourself on the back when you recognize and have a glimpse of awareness. You're not going to jump all of a sudden from continuous negative spiral talking to evolving into a complete awareness of complete open consciousness. It's this process, and you might spiral up and start to reach it, and then you notice maybe a slip, and then you'll spiral up, and so on, till you're moving up the rings of consciousness. And so just having awareness that you had that thought, or that you said that thing, or that that pattern is showing up again. That is all you need. You just need a glimmering shimmer of awareness, a cracking of the curtain for the light to come through, just a speck. It is to pat yourself on the back when you have awareness that you've dropped into an old way of being, an old way of gossiping, an old egotic pattern, an old place of fear, an old place of judgment, any of those patterns. And then if you notice it, that's enormous. And then say, oh, I noticed that. I'm aware that I'm doing that. And then the more you bring recognition to your awareness, an awareness to the awareness, and the more it begins to expand. And the more it begins to expand, all of a sudden you notice, that behavior that I did before, those thoughts that I had, those ways of speaking and being, that is no longer where I am vibrating at. That is no longer who it is that I am. It is easy for others to confine you in a box and label you as being a certain way, even when you have grown considerably. They can project and hold you there. So it is very important that as you're evolving and growing, that it is clear to others and that they are not holding you in a box, that you are a way in which perhaps you might have been at one point. And that you do the same for everyone else, that you see them in their highest potential, in their greatest light, in their healthiest and most vital body, in their most beautiful state on all levels, rather than anchoring in through the word or the thought that they are a certain way, because that just expands and creates and anchors and holds them in that way. And you also want the same for yourself in relationships. We notice that sometimes with siblings or with lovers or family members or whatever, they may think of someone as a child and they were a certain way, or perhaps they had a time in their life where they were an addict, or they were a gossiper, or they were ego boosting all the time, or they were self-centered, whatever it may be. And they project and they're holding them in that pattern. And that person has moved way beyond that and grown. So take time to see if there's anyone in your life that you're holding, that seeing them in a light that perhaps they have outgrown, that they have changed and expanded. And the same for yourself. If there's anyone who perhaps is holding you in an old pattern, and to begin to communicate about seeing one another. This is very important for the collective as well, to see one another in their highest self. So if you have a moment in a relationship where someone was wonderful and behaving delightfully and being amazing and grateful, but a lot of the times they're not, let's say they're egotistical and self-centered, start to tune into the vibration of the moment where they were really just almost, you were surprised. Wow, they were really nice today, and hold them there. And the same for yourself. Find the times and the moments where you are manifesting in your highest vibration. And when you have them, mark them down or make a recording and feel that vibration in your voice or in the camera or somewhere, and keep going back to it so you can keep hitting that note, hitting that vibration of the highest part of self that you have ever been able to express, and keep hitting it and then moving above that. Just like I've told to you, Casey, when you were young, if you want to create abundance, then be with those who are abundant, right? Go sit in a 5-star hotel for the day. And be around the vibration of those who are accepting complete and absolute abundance. They're in abundance, so they're not questioning it or trying to get there. They just are there. They're already holding that vibration. And when you tap into their frequency, then you're holding the same. And that is true whether it be for abundance or joy or clarity or a way of behaving or being. Find what is admirable in yourself and another and focus your attention there. And in doing that, we can guarantee you'll continuously create and manifest that which keeps aligning with your highest self.
Amazing. Thank you. So it's just all about finding those markers and holding that vibration of what we have seen in others and what we've seen in ourselves, of what we do like. It's gratitude, essentially, right?
Yes, well, gratitude is the quickest, fast track way to all creation. And it's so simple, right? You're all always looking for something. I'm going to do all of these things. I'm going to go see the shaman and take ayahuasca, and I'm going to go to the acupuncturist, and I'm going to get a massage, and I'm going to drink something green, right? I'm going to go out in the labyrinth, and I'm going to meditate. And you're always seeking outside of self all these things that you're going to do. But and that's great, and it supports you in elevating your vibration and expanding and moving into higher consciousness and awareness. But when your whole reality is about looking outside of self to find the thing to bring you to the next level, when it's all already there, it resides within, and a willingness to shine the light that it's there and expand upon it, it'll keep growing. But there was something we were wanting to say about that. Oh, there is a noise. Oh, what was it you were saying?
We were talking about gratitude and the amplification of creating what we want in terms of holding the vibrations and seeing others in their divinity so that we can expand our reality into what we want by focusing on things, and where focus goes, where attention goes, energy flows.
Yes, and what we were wanting to say is that gratitude is so simple. And sometimes you all want to learn more, figure something out, look outside of self for some other explanation that is more exciting than just plain old gratitude. But gratitude is a fast track way to the creation of anything and to the reflection and the expression of more joy. And it begins by waking up in the morning and being grateful for whatever it is, simply that you woke up, that you're breathing, that you have hot water, that your toilet flushes, that you have coffee in the morning or tea, whatever it may be. The simplest things. So some say, well, I have nothing to be grateful for. Well, think again. You definitely have something. And when you can find the littlest thing and start expanding upon that, like, oh, well, I can just be grateful for the wind or the rain, or the sun came up, that the planet is still here, that the stars are out, whatever it is, and then keep expanding it more and more into your own experience and your family and your friends and all the things you're grateful for. And if you just do that number one thing and you align that gratitude with absolute love, the vibration of love, and then you forgive yourself and others, you will ascend into what your original question was, which is the fifth dimension, which is a new consciousness that then will reflect heaven on earth.
Amazing, amazing. So
all right. Is there something more?
Well, there is one more question that was written down that we could get through, but you know, it's kind of part of it, but kind of not. So the last question was, how can we trust and know what is true, and why do so many people distrust institutions in the media? Was the last question.
Well, it's perfect, right? It's perfect that you don't trust things the way you used to. You all used to be like little soldiers, and whatever you were told you would do. And now you're like, not so sure I want to do that. I wonder about that. I'm going to question that. Is that true? Because you are awakening to utilizing your own personal discernment. And when that in which you have trusted to be true in whatever institution you're talking about begins to not seem any longer that you can trust, you are forced, because you're not sure that you can rely upon outside information to anchor you, to ground you in reality, you are forced to trust yourself. You are forced to go within. You're forced to use discernment. You're forced to use your own intuitive awareness and knowing. So it's absolutely divinely perfect that more and more of you aren't trusting of whatever it may be, your school or your teacher or your government or whatever, or ideas or ideologies or religions, that you're starting to question things. Because the paradigm of the masculine that was based on outside in, which is important and has its place, has obviously is extraordinarily out of balance. And as the divine feminine arises and the deep within internal energy must be expanded upon, of course, the universal laws will align to collapse that in which you knew to be true, to force you to go within, to find the answers inside from the divine feminine energy that then balances with the divine masculine to create a union of love that you are moving toward. And so you could perceive the fact that you cannot trust things that you could trust before and label that as bad or negative. Or you could see it as how perfect it is, because it is an opportunity for awakening to remember that the answers lie within. And so with that, I shall be going. I send to you all of my love and all of my light, and I'm delighted to be of any service I can. Many blessings and good day.
Good day.